All right, Arijit, do you want to get started officially?
Sure.
All right. So everyone, welcome to Taking Back Our World. We're going to try to keep this as close to an hour as possible. What we'll likely do is have an hour-long event and then stay on for a few minutes extra for those who can stay to have a little bit more of an informal conversation. And with that, Mr. Arijit Sen, who is a genius. I called you a rogue architect this week. Sorry, I like building up expectations. Is going to give us an introduction to what we're all here to do. Arijit.
All right, lower the expectations right now. Welcome, everyone. It's so nice to have so many people today and on Saturday. Thank you for coming. I just wanted to give you a quick introduction to the project. Taking Back Our World is a project that explores human responses to social and environmental injustice. So I should start here. Over 8 years, our partnership with residents of Milwaukee's Washington Park and Sherman Park neighborhoods has produced stories of caring, heritage, civic action that is otherwise ignored or unheard. We believe in the power of storytelling to transform our world into a better place for all, and we have seen that happen in the work of many of our collaborators, and a few of them are present today. Our stories became part of a national traveling exhibit on environmental justice involving 20 other cities that was scheduled to show in Milwaukee in June 2020, but the exhibit got postponed due to the pandemic. Instead, we decided to send the exhibit materials to the community residents in form of weekly student-designed newspapers stuffed in boxes of fresh produce offered by 3 local growers. We call these conversation starter boxes. We envision a new kind of public conversation emerge through food, printed materials, and online meetings this summer so that residents can discuss ways to fight the historical processes of racism and injustice. Now, our work has always been local, but is local action enough to transform our worlds? Today, we ask you to consider the larger collaborations and solidarities and the potentials of that across cultures and geographies. The Saturday series of webinars is part of a conversation where Milwaukee citizen leaders will have an opportunity to have talk with change agents from Newark, New Jersey, the home of our institutional partner, the Humanities Action Lab. We hope that these conversations will spark new possibilities of collaborations and solidarities across distances in our common journey to find and build a just society. So please come back every Saturday at 11 a.m. for more such discussions. I do want to welcome and thank our participants, CAMILLE May and Reggie Jackson from Milwaukee, our guests from Newark, Anthony Diaz, Neil Marr, Christine Rodriguez, and my dear friend Adam Carr. They have all really very busy lives, but they came here today despite that. We are grateful. I also want to take a minute to thank the dedicated team of students who made this into a reality. Chelsea Waite, Tatum Markey, Grant Hamidar Dinger, Mallory Zink, and many others who created this project. And the project is funded by a generous grant from the Wisconsin Humanities Council. I'm out. Thank you. Chelsea, it's yours.
Much, Arijit. I actually just real quick before we go back into the, I have a mascot for these conversations, so I'm going to be present in all these, and here it is. I'm going to show it to you. It is this thing. This is a Cream City brick. And I think if there was something that could embody both of the places of Brick City and Cream City, it is this thing, Cream City brick. These are actually very common in the city of Milwaukee. One of our local quarries produces sort of cream colored stone. So these Cream City bricks are both iconic here, but I wanted to also shout out Brick City. So I'm going to have that on my table just to feel clever for all the conversations and also to invite us into a shared space across both of our cities. So Chelsea, can you, who is Command Central, can you launch the PowerPoint? So it just so happens that all the people I know from Milwaukee that are partaking in this conversation are remarkable world-class people that I'm proud to call friends and neighbors, and I'm sure the folks in New Jersey are just the same. Chelsea, can you move us forward into the introduction slides? So the first person to introduce themselves is Camille Mays, who just yesterday, Camille and I had a great couple hour long conversation at a physically distanced protocol on her porch. Camille, can you give us just a couple minute introduction to who you are and what you do in the world?
Muted.
All
Hey
right.
everybody, my name is Camille Mays. I am the creator and founder of Peace Garden Project MKE that was founded in 2015. I don't know if I should be an organizer or activist or advocate, but whatever, I do a lot of different things and fight for a lot of the inequities in our community. And I also like to bring light to a couple of topics usually when I get out here and speak. And one of the topics is showing the positive things that the community are doing in the neighborhoods. And then two, bringing a lot of attention to myself and other grassroots organizers who are out there a lot of times doing work for free and trying to bring awareness to a lot of the work that's done out here so that myself and others like myself here in Milwaukee can get more support because I really feel like it's very impactful the work that grassroots organizers do because we're down with our boots and feet on the ground working with the people, and we often know a lot of the things um, and a lot of the little intricate details. Just for example, when people need help, we'll tell them to just call a number. Well, the organizers know that those numbers have limited resources. The organizers know all of the other outlets that the number that everybody calls, don't have. And so I just try and bring more awareness to some of the things and the ideas that we have had and try and get that out here in the world and expose that.
So Camille, we're going to be able to talk about this more as we move forward. Just for someone
Okay.
who's never heard of it before, in 30 seconds, what is Peace Garden MKE?
Peace Garden MKE is community building, beautification, art, and wellness and mindfulness, just all in one, if I could sum it up.
All right, cool. And we'll dig a little bit more into the backstory of it and kind of the work you've done with families and through healing as we move forward. And this is actually a photo I took of Camille yesterday. So Camille hasn't seen this photo yet because I was just sitting across from her on her porch. Let's move to our next esteemed panelist. Chris, you are going to be up next. Chris, who I don't know yet, we just had a little bit of interaction. Would you mind giving us a little bit of sense of who you are?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Christian Rodriguez. I'm with Ironbound Community Corporation. I'm a community organizer and an urban farmer down at Down Bottom Farms with ICC. I'm a Newark native, and actually a lot of the organizing that I do is around the neighborhood in which I grew up in. I grew up in public housing, so I know a whole lot about the injustices that we face living in those conditions, and then also the fact that we're surrounded on all four sides by polluters such as the ports. We have a garbage incinerator that's like less than a mile from many homes, and so many other things that contribute to the injustices in our neighborhood. So I'm a big advocate with making a change, and also, educating through farming, right? Teaching the youth about the importance of food sovereignty and, the importance of the land and also the importance that they also have. And it's actually not my picture there, but it's cool. I had to send you all an updated picture of me to replace with that one. But yeah, we definitely, teach the youth, a lot about, them knowing that they have a voice and knowing how to use that, whether it be through the advocacy work and going down to the incinerator and marching, or through our bike repair program, where we ride out to different events to speak up about different situations that are happening in our neighborhood. So,
For sure.
yeah, that's me.
Chris, our deepest apologies. I don't know what happened
Okay,
on the
look.
mix up with your image.
No,
Really, really sorry about that.
it's okay.
But I think we're going to have time to talk more about the work that you've been doing as we move forward. I really want to learn more about marches of those incinerators, but Reggie Jackson, our next panelist, who is so for those of you in Newark, Reggie's name over the last handful of years has become stronger and stronger, just in being kind of a people's historian, telling stories of the city that a lot of folks aren't taught in schools, but really need to know. So Reggie, thank you for being here. Can you give us a couple-minute introduction of who you are and what you do?
Sure. I think most people in Milwaukee know me from my volunteer work as a griot at America's Black Holocaust Museum. The griots, that's the name we use instead of docents at the museum. And we follow in the tradition of our West African ancestors. Griots are oral historians, the keepers of the history of their community. And that's a big part of what I do, along with my company, Nurturing Diversity Partners. We do diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And a big part of what we use is historical context. So I've studied very closely the history of Metro Milwaukee. We are considered the most segregated community in the United States of America. And so what I've done over the last several years is really dig into that history of how we became the most segregated community, and looked at how segregation policies intersected with other things like the loss of manufacturing jobs, the growth of poverty, disinvestment by local, state, and federal government in the Black and brown communities in Milwaukee, and really help people understand kind of how we got to where we are, where we have so many disparities and difficulties when it comes to being a person of color in this community. Every community of color in Milwaukee has a poverty rate exceeding 30%. And there's a very specific set of reasons for that that most people here don't know. So I try to provide that information for people so that when they have conversations about where we are, they really kind of know what the genesis of the problems were, and they can have what I call productive conversations. So that's pretty much it.
Hey, Reggie, it's always a pleasure to spend some time with you. And I look forward to hearing a little bit more of the narratives that you offer as we move forward. Our next panelist is Anthony DIAZ. Anthony, thank you for being here. Anthony's with the Newark Water Coalition, working with the North Ward of Newark. Can you elucidate us a little bit on who you are in a couple minutes?
So my name is Anthony DIAZ, born and raised in Newark, New Jersey, local rabble rouser. If there's some kind of injustice, I seem to be at the center of it, yelling all the time, preferably on a bullhorn. So in 2018, I co-founded the Newark Water Coalition. Newark is going through kind of a lead crisis currently. And so this organization has really tackled and been at the forefront on the lead issue. And now during COVID, we're trying to expand into different things such as like defund the police and housing rights. And so a lot of my work has been centered around Newark and the state of New Jersey, but it's great to make these connections across the country as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony, for being here with us. And if at any point any of us steps out of line, let us know. You roused that rabble to sick them on us. So our last panelist right now, so Neil is going to introduce himself now, and then come back at sort of the tail end of the conversation as we move into the formal Q&A period. Neil, I'll let you introduce yourself. Neil, tell us who you are.
Sure. My name is Neil Maher, and I'm a historian. I teach at Rutgers University in Newark, and also the New Jersey Institute of Technology. It's a federated history department. I've been a professor there for almost 20 years, so I've been teaching in Newark, and I'm teaching just an amazing bunch of students. Most of our students come from the local area. A lot of them are commuter students. A lot of them are really on the front lines of environmental injustice in our region. And in the past 3 or 4 years, I've really focused my teaching on environmental inequality and environmental justice. And what I've been doing is running research seminars where my students choose a site. And often it's a site from their home communities, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. And then they go out and they conduct primary research on the environmental injustice that's taking place in their community. So I've had students look at the city of Newark as a food desert. I've had students look at the incinerator in the city of Newark, a number of toxic waste sites in the city of Newark, and even a dog park in the city of Newark, and how there was environmental injustices going on in the dog park regarding its former use as a toxic waste site. So the idea behind the research is that these students get to not only learn about their communities, but also promote their research, because we've put together a website that's publicly accessible so that these students can highlight their research, and people from the outside world can come in and look at their research and learn about the inequalities that are going on in their communities, and perhaps use some of the strategies that locals have embraced to try to right those wrongs, maybe use those strategies to help their own communities. And that's how I got involved with the Humanities Action Lab at Rutgers. So we've been working closely together on just trying to get the word out that not only are these environmental injustices happening, but there are people who are researching it and using their own voices to get the word out for themselves, but also to help other people as well.
All right.
I'm glad to be here.
And we will come back to you in a little bit. So over the course of the next half an hour or so, and actually, Chelsea, you can stop the screen share now. The next half an hour or so, we're going to walk through a series of questions. The ARC, we're going to be talking, kind of rooting us a little bit more in the history and identity of both of our cities, so Milwaukee and Newark. We're going to talk a little bit about what environment and climate injustice mean within those two places, then discuss the strengths and the ongoing challenges of both of our places, and then discuss a little bit and kind of the all play at the end, how the two cities can cross. What I want to introduce to all the folks who are here not as a panelist, feel free to make comments and write questions in the chat. If we don't address them immediately, we will get to them at least at the end. So the chat is open so it can kind of be a rolling Q&A. If you have a comment or question you want to throw into the mix, we will take it and start discussing it. So to go into an introduction of each city and its history, I'm going to crib from Mr. Reggie Jackson an analogy that I like that you use sometimes, which is sometimes the history of your city can be like a big gallon bag full of jigsaw puzzle pieces you find at Goodwill. And you don't know what the image is going to look like, and especially you kind of try to cobble it together from here and there, and you kind of start piecing it together. But oftentimes you'll find that the images and the stories that are told by your city aren't necessarily the ones by the communities that Christian and Anthony and Camille and Reggie are a part of. So to start, can you guys just give us a sense of how you see and understand your city, the history, the identity, the culture of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and Newark, New Jersey? And why don't we start? Actually, I'd love for our friends in Newark to start.
I don't mind taking this question. It's funny, yesterday someone asked me, what is Newark? And I had like all these adjectives, like it's diverse, it's this and all of that. But people from Newark have like this overwhelming sense of pride. Like, this is our city, this is, our specific neighborhood. And, it's I hate to say, like, sometimes we have that like outsider versus insider narrative, but because we understand that you go through so much adversity in this city, so much grit, you have to have resilience, you just have to have this certain type of character that anybody who's from Newark knows. And so I feel like when we look at our city, there's so many different aspects to it, but that kind of like inherent trait in anybody who's from Newark is one of just overcoming. And so that is, to me, is like interwoven in our history when you talk about like the rebellion in the 60s, the gentrification, everything, the environmental racism, all of that plays into a role into this, who we are as a people. So that's what Newark is for me.
For sure. Christian, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can't agree more. Like we definitely have a sense of pride, you know, about Newark. Coming from, I mean, I lived elsewhere and I will always represent Newark, you know, and no matter where I went. I mean, I even have tattoo of New Jersey with, yeah, see, it goes hard, you know, the love for Newark. So, but yeah, you know, unfortunately, you know, we're overburdened with so many, you know, environmental, you know, injustices and, you know, social injustices and like, you know, the list can go on, you know. Speaking of like the incinerator down the street, you know, there were several back in the 80s that were proposed all around New Jersey, but the only two that received those incinerators was Camden and Newark, which are the two biggest, heavily, you know, populated communities with people of color, you know, poor people of color. And so, that's an example of the, you know, the unfortunate, you know, or the racism, you know, the environmental racism that happens, you know, to us. So, but like we said, you know, we still stand strong. We know we got that voice and nothing's going to stop us, you know, from fighting and doing what we got to do to make that change. Right, Anthony?
That's right.
I like you both have ink. Christian, just tell us, for those who don't know, what an incinerator is, because that isn't a phenomenon I know from the state of Wisconsin, Milwaukee. What's an incinerator?
Oh, a garbage incinerator. It's supposed to be renewable energy, right? Where we get tons and tons and tons of trash that's burnt for energy, right? But a lot of the stuff that you're burning, you don't know what you're burning. You don't know what type of toxins you're putting into the air. And it's literally down the street from many communities, schools, you know.
Yep.
Our communities are really, we have a high rate of asthma already. So with the addition of a garbage incinerator that's burning trash and you know, emitting like particulate matter 2.5, which it's really like a heavy pollutant out into the, you know, into the atmosphere, you know, that's, you know, we're heavily burdened with a lot of that.
Sure.
In addition, a lot of the trash, the messed up part about it is that the trash that we receive or that's burned in the incinerator, at least 80% of the trash that's burned in the incinerator, and my math might be wrong, my numbers might be wrong, but it doesn't come from Newark, you know, it comes from New York. It comes from upstate New York at that, you know, affluent communities. And so it, so it's a messed up situation that the trash that's burnt there is not really all from our community, but from other places.
Sure. That is that kind of remarkable racist disparity is something we are very familiar with in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that was my segue. Reggie and Camille, do you guys want to talk a little bit about the city you guys are part of? And actually, both of you are sitting in the Sherman Park neighborhood right now in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So who wants to go first? You know what, Reggie, because I know you can kind of be the cleanup hitter on history. Camille, can you go first and share a little bit of your understanding, kind of the history of Milwaukee, its identity, its culture, and your place within it?
I think Milwaukee is and has always been, from as far back as I can see, a tale of two cities. And I honestly, just looking at what's happened to Milwaukee and working on this project and what's been going on, I see us in our neighborhood, our community, especially like along the corridors, as disposable. I've always seen us as disposable in our neighborhoods. They put factories here. They were trying to put another one here. And a lot of those areas around have a lot of health disparities, like they were talking about, like from the incinerators. I also noticed that a lot of investment in energy is put into downtown, and even this new downtown area that they're working on and have had mapped out for years that people aren't really aware of. I just wish that it was as much passion in downtown and the rest of the city to invest in other parts of the city. And I noticed something that I didn't really think about until just last weekend. Adam and Mary Lou Schumacher took me and my fiance Greg out for nature. in Three Bridges Park. And then I realized how much we invest into our parks and stuff too. I just really thought about it, thought about the parks and thought about the lake and just thought about when they were going to close down one of the pools at the parks, how people fought. Like a lot of people like from all over stood up for that park. And so I know that we have a strong sense of nature too. But I've really noticed like the freeways tore through a lot of neighborhoods, divided our city. The factories and a lot of things were done to the infrastructure and the connecting between the communities. And I noticed over time it's been like a division of even the communities. Like on one side of the freeway is more suburban than the other. And I just think one thing that also pisses me off about, you know, this state is that most of the money in the state, this is a white state, first of all, and most of the money and most of the inequities, like the people who are in office for the state, like it's very hard for us to get justice because most of the people in the state don't have the mentality, the mindset, the care and concern for Milwaukee. So we're flooding all this money from Milwaukee into the state and we're not getting it back to invest back into our city. And that really bothers me. And it's like we all often talk about voting, but in the other places in Wisconsin, it's hard to get them to vote differently because it's a whole culture here. And so that's what I'm struggling with now, you know, like getting those big changes that we want to see and encouraging people to vote and stuff. Like how, when the majority of the state really don't have our best interest in Milwaukee at heart. And so that's kind of where I'm at right now with where our city is and looking at the challenges around those things and how we can, you know, mobilize around that.
Absolutely.
How can we change legislation and stuff when they don't agree with it?
For sure. Thank you, Camille. Reggie, I know that you could probably give a series of 12 2-hour-long lectures on this question of Milwaukee and its history. In fact, I know you do. Can you just give us a 2-minute overview for what someone who doesn't know what Milwaukee is to get them rooted and grounded in a conversation that we need to have here?
Yeah, so Milwaukee is, as Camille said, blacks in the state of Wisconsin only account for 6.3% of the population in the entire state. And so Milwaukee is kind of seen as a place that people outside of Milwaukee don't care about. And there's been, you know, we talk about investment all the time, right? But one thing we don't talk about is disinvestment. There's been a tremendous amount of disinvestment in Milwaukee over a period of the last 40 plus years, particularly as it relates to those communities that depended on those manufacturing jobs. The manufacturing jobs, you know, the breweries, the tanneries, places of that nature are the communities that brought Black people to Milwaukee in the 1940s. During World War II, the Black population grew from 21,000 in 1950 to over 105,000 by 1970, because people came here from Mississippi and Alabama and Arkansas because they had really good jobs, family supporting wage jobs. And then those factories started to go away. We lost 91,000 manufacturing jobs from 1963 to 2015. And in 1970, 43% of all Blacks in the city of Milwaukee worked in one of those factories. So we depended on those jobs more heavily than any community in the United States. We even had a higher rate of people working in those types of jobs than Detroit had. And so what happened is, you know, when the big factories closed, the little ones closed too. And a lot of the little ones were in a community, it's a place called the 30th Street Corridor. And guess what? Those factories are still there. The buildings are empty. You know, the environmental toxins in those buildings are still floating through the air in those neighborhoods. Those communities look absolutely horrible. It looks like a war zone because the city has continually disinvested in those communities, as we've been spending billions of dollars downtown, giving billionaire owners of the Milwaukee Bucks money to build a stadium that they could have paid for themselves. Building, you know, a trolley downtown that, you know, most people in the city will never ride. We've disinvested significantly in the Black and the brown communities in Milwaukee, and those communities suffer so many different ways. And, you know, there just doesn't seem to be any abatement of this disinvestment. We talk about it a lot. You know, these are issues that both communities have raised continuously for decades, but we just don't seem to get any traction with our elected officials on the local level. You know, Camille talked about our state elected officials. They could care less about the condition of the Black and brown communities in Milwaukee because they already think that the problems we have are because we're bad people, that we're our own worst enemies. And, you know, as much tax dollars as the city of Milwaukee sends to the state, and, you know, we barely get 75% of that money back from the state. So we're really giving money to other parts of the state to be nice and comfortable and pretty. At the same time, our city has fallen apart. But we have a very resilient community, though, a very resilient community. The Black and brown communities in Milwaukee are very strong advocates for changes that they need. We fight very hard. We're just, you know, it's like, you know, hitting your head up against a brick wall because you can't get the support of many of our elected officials that just, you know, I hate to say this, but we have a lot of very weak-minded elected officials in the state of Wisconsin. We have a lot of elected officials who just really could care less about Milwaukee. And so the struggle is real here. Very similar to what Newark has had, you know, advocates for change, advocates for making the city a safe and comfortable place for everybody, but some voices just simply are not heard. And that's the case in both cities, I think.
For sure. You know, something that happens to Reggie, I know fairly frequently, and I bet Christian, Anthony, and Camille, this happens to you. Do people tell you to run for elected office?
Yeah,
Oh,
all the time.
yeah.
But I
All the
did
time.
I did politics campaign work first. That's actually what made me switch over to community. So it's like a nightmare for me.
So, and the reason I point that out is a lot of times truth tellers, and like when people hear truth in community and they hear the truth of community reflected and the ways that you guys just put it, they're like, can't those people just be in charge? So this conversation we're having right now is about environmental and climate injustice. Can you guys talk about, against the backgrounds that you just described, and I think, how does that manifest itself in your city? So I think, and Christian and Anthony, you guys have discussed a little bit, but in this conversation about climate and environmental justice, I think sometimes the urgent can eclipse the important. So the apparent needs of the moment or day sometimes can defer work. Like sometimes climate work can sound like it's about the future as opposed to the today. Can you talk about then how, you know, what that work looks like on the ground of getting people to mobilize around climate and environmental injustice?
For me, it was definitely a slow burn. You know, it was like, oh, you're talking about lead poisoning, but our water doesn't come out brown. It's fine. There's no problems. There's no issues. The administration is saying this. You know, it was just very, very hard. But I knew early on, and what I said to my team was, if we can organize around this issue, we can organize around any issue. And what people, you know, like you said, we can definitely, especially if you're an activist or organizer, you're just trying to put out as many fires as possible. But it's not sustainable. It doesn't help you long term. And you just have to understand like how it all plays a role. So fortunately enough, I had a team that believed in me and they allowed me to do kind of crazy things and really believed that, you know, everything that we were doing was building long-term power. And they can kind of see that now. Right now, you know, fortunately, we have a platform that has opened a lot of doors in a lot of spaces. And people go, well, how did you get there? How'd you make that happen? And I often tell them, it's very simple. You just have to do the work. You know, you have to be out there. You have to knock on doors. You have to be consistent. You have to execute at a high level. And you have to empower people. It's not enough to just give people resources on a silver platter and then, you know, wave them goodbye. People have heard that song and dance, especially in the Black and brown community. We know that there's so many people that, you know, envision themselves as a Superman type figure, swoop in, try to save the day, and then swoop right back out when the money dries up or when they're tired or when they're burnt out. But if you're empowering people to take control for themselves and give them the tools to really work and manifest their own destinies, then they're going to buy in, and that's going to help you down the road. And so, you know, it's taken us a while. I mean, I shouldn't even say a while. It's taken us 2 years, but the community that, you know, that we've operated in for the last 2 years has changed dramatically. dramatically. And I think, you know, sometimes it's really tough because even, you know, myself, I have those days where I'm like, you know, what the fuck am I doing? I'm frustrated. I'm tired. I don't want to do this work anymore. But then you get that sense of hope and, you know, reframe what success looks like. And you're like, oh, wow, I made a difference in someone's life today. Oh, wow, this community is changing as a result of the work that we started 2 years ago. And again, it's poured into so many different things. When the George Floyd protests started happening, now, mind you, we're the Newark Water Coalition. We've had at least, I want to say, probably 5 different community members reach out to us and they said, hey, we know that you're always, you know, protesting about the water or talking about the water. Can you help us with, you know, put together a Black Lives Matter protest? Can you help us, you know, talk about defund the police? And we're open to all of these things. We're never going to say no because all struggles are interconnected. And you have to build those correlations for some people because it's not, you know, so transparent as it is to the organizer and to the activist. Sometimes you really have to sit down there and draw these dots or draw the lines to connect these dots to local community members so they can see how, like, wow, fighting for water is going to help me fight for rent later or fight for some other right, or how, you know, it all plays a part together. And I did run for office twice and I hated it, but the second time was a lot fun, more fun than the first time.
All right. Yeah, just to piggyback off of what Anthony said, you definitely want to, you know, connect all of the injustices that are happening in the neighborhood, right? There's housing injustices, there's, you know, the environmental situations, there's the social justice, you know, with the police, and so with Ironbound Community Corporation, like we have a team that, you know, of folks that dedicate to each one of them. Right now, we're working on a housing bill, right, where we're hoping that we made it, you know, to the assembly. Now it's up to the Senate, you know, to put it to vote, and then hopefully it gets to Governor Murphy to put it into action, where it's giving folks who haven't been able to pay rent because of COVID, you know, time to pay back any back rent. So that's, you know, one of the things that we're working on. In addition to that, we're also on the other side of it, we're working on an environmental justice bill, where right now Newark already has a cumulative impact ordinance where it looks at cumulatively all the polluters or the environmental, I guess, polluters that are affecting the community cumulatively, and how that may be impacting the community, and whether or not, if there's any other development that's coming into the community, whether or not that new developer, whether or not that's going to affect the community with the burden that it's already taken in. And so Newark already has that, but we wanted to take it a little bit, you know, a step further. And so we've been proposing with, you know, helps of several other organizations and, you know, folks who've been helping us with this, where we're now have, you know, an environmental justice bill, A2212, I want to say, where we wanted to bring it to vote now. We're asking for the Senate to actually bring it to vote, where it again looks at, you know, all of the burden, you know, in a community, and if a new developer wants to, it kind of puts us on as a watchdog, right? Like, okay, who's coming in, who's coming out, what kind of environmental pollutants are being emitted into the air, you know. Can this, you know, our atmosphere or our community take on any other burdens, or what do we need to do to clean it up a little bit more? So that, you know, it looks at different things in that aspect too. You know, it makes our environmental justice bill a little bit more stronger than what it is. So that's what we're fighting for. And so, like, and all of that is all interconnected. You know, if you know, we don't have a good environment to live in, you know, how can we, like, successfully, you know, flourish and be, you know, better, you know? So it's pretty much, you know, a lot of the work that we've been doing on the ground.
The work you guys, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
The work you guys are doing is just so remarkable. And to tie that a little bit to Milwaukee is you guys are building power with community members, not for community members, right? Like you're not saying, here's the power, come get it.
Right.
And to reference a little bit the freeways, which Camille described, that were in the 60s and 70s in Milwaukee, but then this recent boom of downtown development we've had. A lot of times people in Black and brown communities in Milwaukee can feel like the city happens to them as opposed to they happen to the city. And if we're going to take back our world as we're discussing, the kind of power building strategies that you guys have employed, where people are building collective agendas and then going smash mouth and saying, we're not going to take no for an answer, like that's a deep part of how we take the world back. Reggie and Camille, do you guys want to talk a little bit about environmental and climate injustice as it exists in Milwaukee, Wisconsin?
Yeah, so me and Reggie and the students, one of the reasons why I got connected with the Humanities Action Lab in the first place was because we decided to do the exhibit, which was on climate and environmental justice. And I don't know, I like love everything. Y'all can see my flowers and plants and stuff. So I'm like a nature person. And so I've always been like obsessed with like the way of the world, like the rainforest, and just I've always had pets. Like I'm a earthy kid, girl, or whatever. And it just bothers me. I did a paper when I was like 19 about global warming. And so I've been like a geek for like renewable energy, the ozone layer, pollution, how all of these things affect us. And as I got older and started doing community work, I started seeing how that tied into us with like the water, the air quality, and just different things. But then how it leads to the health disparities and how it's like a chain reaction. But then not only that, but I started saying like, looking around like, dang, the environment look like crap. I feel like crap. People feel like crap. It's not hopeful. Like that's kind of what the Peace Garden Project started with just looking around like, damn, it's messed up. Why don't our neighborhoods look like whatever? Why isn't our McDonald's like over there in West Dallas? Why isn't our gas stations is neat and clean and we could go in their bathrooms and whatever? So I just start looking at like our environment totally look like crap. And a lot of people like Reggie and people like they say, the people in the communities, they do it to themselves, right? They do it. They don't, whatever. Well, part of that, you know, comes with the hopeless mentality. I mean, it looks hopeless. Like it's not even, it's so much disparity. And so the city don't even come do the alleys and street sweep like they should. The city don't even do their lots, but they'll find us. So it's like all these environmental inequities, these dilapidated houses and stuff. Man, listen, if one of our houses had all those code violations, we would be getting fined and fined on top of fines. So it's just the lack of care and concern and accountability from one end, but they not like they hold us accountable to a certain standard, but then they don't. So first it shows us the city don't care about us, the city not trying to do certain things in the community. And then the people, like the whole attitude, it's like the broken windows theory, like, you know, and just people just get hopeless. When it's memorials all over the neighborhoods, it look like a cemetery. When it's pollution and stuff. And then I'm telling you, as a community organizer, I've done cleanups. It's very discouraging when you're doing a cleanup and you're on a block and then people are telling you like you missed the spot by their house. Like, are you serious? So it's like, it's a frustration as an organizer getting people out of the hopelessness, but yet understanding it and trying to get them to like sign on to it. So that's what I like about this movement now. Black and brown people and poor people been fighting forever. And now it's like other people are starting to jump on board who weren't on board, who are minorities, and white allies are starting to jump on board now. Like, okay, we really see what's going on. And then with REGGIE, real quick, with REGGIE and the students. So REGGIE and them came in, and I was like, oh, this is really dope. I'm glad y'all came in. All of these things are really nice, but I feel like a zoo exhibit. These schools come in here, they work with us, they get all of this information, and then they leave, they bounce. We don't hear nothing else. We don't know what they did with the plans, what's going on. And so I basically was like, Reggie, if you really value us like you say you do, let's start putting some of this into fruition. Let's start doing this. Let's start showing the model for what this should look like and what collaboration should be, instead of just doing a paper. Where's the,
Yeah.
you got all these brains with the community advocates, and then we not putting this into play. So we put it into play. So since I started working with REGGIE, me and another community leader and one more who's on the call, we wanted to invest into some vacant lots in the area and make them into pocket parks. Well, we couldn't get buy-in from the people to do a pocket park. They didn't feel safe in the neighborhood. They didn't feel like they would utilize a pocket park. They would not take their kids. And so Tremero, Sherry, and I, and other organizers from over here. It's a couple. We just would do community events. It's several of them. Like all the organizers in Sherman Park. You know, you look at them. It's Sherry, it's Farina, Jennifer and RP. You got Vaughn. You got a lot of people in this area. So we just have a concentrated amount of organizers in this neighborhood. And Regis started like working with all of us, like individually on certain things. And so in short, we've been able to do just some awareness things, some actions. We've been able to get volunteer support. We've been able to get some planters, some benches, art installations, planning another art installation, some lighting, a stage. I mean, just so many things we've done in just the past couple of years, just the last 1 or 2 years. And so if you take a look at that, and then looking at COVID and what's going on now, the community organizers have been very limited with the work in the region and everything. And you look at the homicides even since 2015, and that's when I jumped into Peace Garden. The homicides have went down every year with all of us working with the city and trying to work on police community relations. Now, what you see here right now in August, we're already bypassed with the homicides of last year. We had to hold back because of COVID. A lot of organizations aren't doing outreach as they were. A lot of us aren't out here. Like I've been back. I haven't even been protesting as much as I would like because my 95-year-old grandmother is in the home with us. And so as we kind of fell back with COVID, you start seeing spikes in homicide, domestic violence, and suicides. And so what that shows me is proof that the grassroots organizers and organizations are needed in collaboration with the police in the city. They cannot do it on their own. They cannot do it on their own.
And oftentimes do it for free. And so when we have these conversations about defunding police, like refunding community, what we're seeing there is some of the most important agents in violence prevention in the city are not on the city
It's
dime.
not them.
It's
And
not
I'm
the
gonna
city
say
dime,
it,
yeah.
it's not the city. It's not, I'm sorry, I like, you know, the Office of Violence Prevention and everything, but it's not the truth. The truth is the activists, the advocates, the organizers are the ones who are helping them find that balance. The truth is when they're trying to find out, they call us to the table, but they're getting paid a lot of money. The truth is we're not being funded, and they find excuses to not fund us by saying we have to be nonprofits when they can pay us as contractors. The truth is they're hiring community outreach people, and we're doing their job for free for them. And the truth is we're fed up, and we have value. We are experts, and we need to be valued, and we need to be supported. And that's what I'm going to stand on, and I'm going to always stand on. In spite of all these inequities, if they would support the people on the ground and work with them and strengthen those bonds in the community building, a lot of the stuff proactively would be fixed. And that's the only thing we need to get to as we get to all of this. A lot of those systems will be broken down. Let the people who know how to do the work, support them, stop trying to figure it out, and just support them. Stop having meetings to have meetings. We know what the issues are.
So thank you, Camille. Reggie, so we're gonna run over time. Anthony, Christian, Neil, Reggie, Camille, is that okay with you?
Mm-hmm.
If we go like an extra maybe 15 minutes or so over time. Reggie, can you give a shot? And Neil, we'll come to you shortly. Reggie, can you talk a little bit about climate and environmental injustice as it lives and breeds in Milwaukee?
Yeah, one of the points Anthony made was, talking about, connecting people with different issues. And one of the things that I advocate for is connecting the dots between one issue and another issue. They're all interrelated somehow, right? So when we talk about all of these issues that both communities have, if you pay close enough attention, you can find the common threads that connect all of these issues together. Because ultimately, the work that all of these community organizers are doing is really they're raising awareness among people within the community, because our elected officials, they're not talking about a lot of these issues, right? They're too busy, trying to look for a television camera so that they can make it seem like they're doing something when they're not really doing much. So I look at these issues and I always say this about Milwaukee, and I'm sure this is true for Newark, is that the issues that we have that we're constantly blamed for, this is it's a classic example of victim blaming. You create conditions within the community, and then those conditions have repercussions, and then you go in and you blame the community for what's happened, right? So you look at the people and you say, well, if you would have done this, and if you didn't do that, then your community wouldn't look the way it looks, without really having them have an understanding that there are forces at play that they don't even know about who these forces are. So for instance, they talked about in Newark, this lead crisis with their water. Milwaukee has a lead crisis with its water. We have, a crisis in lead in old homes. One of the things I think is really important for us to understand about lead. So the two primary methods that children get lead is through lead paint and lead water. So in Milwaukee, we have over 70,000 homes in the city that have lead lateral pipes. Now, everybody has known that lead is dangerous to children for decades, right? We've known that there should have been, some mitigation efforts getting rid of those lead laterals in Milwaukee. Our capital, Madison, Wisconsin, they simply said, listen, it's a problem. We're going to get rid of every lead lateral in the city of Madison, and we're not going to have the taxpayers, the homeowners, whoever. They're not going to pay a nickel of it. We'll pay for it ourselves. We'll use tax dollars and we'll pay for it. They don't have to write a check themselves. But here in Milwaukee, you live in a home. If you're a homeowner, you're going to charge the company's going to charge you thousands and thousands of dollars to remove the lead laterals, right? And if you are a renter, guess what? What incentive does your landlord have to remove the lead lateral pipes? Because he or she doesn't live in the house anyway, could care less if your little 3-year-old child or 5-year-old or 7-year-old is drinking water tainted with lead. This is the thing that people have to understand, is that the people who have the power to really make these changes happen, they don't care about those challenges, because it's not something that directly impacts them. And that's why you have these strong voices of community members, like Christian, like Anthony, Camille, all of these folks in Milwaukee, because if it wasn't for these folks out here speaking, advocating, the powers that be would be silent on these issues. And I look at Milwaukee and I say that this is what we have to understand. Milwaukee was really a great place for Black people to live in the early 1970s. We had the seventh highest median family income for Blacks in the United States of America. Our median family income at that time was the equivalent of $50,000 in today's money. Today, it's about $27,000. So we have a lot of people that are living in poverty. A lot of families living in poverty, not because people got lazy and people didn't want to work, because really good jobs went away. And we don't have a regional transit authority that's going to take people out to our suburbs, to where the job growth is, right? So we have a lot of challenges, but ultimately I say that the key is not just connecting the issues, but connecting the dots that show you how all of these issues are interrelated to one another. Disinvestment in one area is directly related to disinvestment in another area. The fact that people don't know about how segregation developed. We talk about segregation, but the key thing about segregation is that it was very simple. What it did was the policies and practices of federal government, state, local governments was to enrich white folks, to make sure they became homeowners, generational homeowners. And guess what? When you're a homeowner, you build up equity, right? And you can use that equity. So if you have some lead paint in your house that you need to be abated, you take out a home equity loan and you get that taken care of. But if you're a renter, you trying to convince your landlord to do that, he's not going to spend any money to abate the lead in your house. If you are a person who has generational wealth, 3, 4, 5 generations of your family have been homeowners, you built up enough equity within your family that, hey, you can go ahead and pay that money to get the lead lateral pipes removed. But if you're in the Black and brown community, well, we were restricted from becoming homeowners by banks and realtors who simply said, we're not going to loan you money. And they're still discriminating to this day. Wells Fargo Bank was sued. Associated Bank was sued. Countrywide Financial was sued for hundreds of millions of dollars because they were giving different loans to Black and brown borrowers as they were to whites. They gave them better loans. They gave them lower interest rates, lower fees. And so the Black and brown communities, the ones that need the help the most, were the ones that were getting screwed over. And so here we are dealing with that issue. And because of that, we have a home ownership rate for Blacks nationwide in 1968. When the Federal Fair Housing Act was passed, was 41.3%. Today it's 42.9%. So we barely made any change. But what people don't know, though, is it peaked in 2005 at about 50% for Blacks nationwide. It's been going down every year since. And it's going to continue to go down with this crisis, the economic crisis related to COVID. It's going to be horrible in so many places. And part of how this is going to intersect with the environmental justice is a lot of people are going to be homeless. There are a ton of people that are going to be homeless over the next several months. As the winter months kick in, they're getting evicted. The homes that they live in, that they rent, are being foreclosed on because the landlords are like, screw it, I'm not going to pay the mortgage because I'm not getting rent. So there's going to be a huge crisis with that moving forward. Sure. And how do we deal with that as well?
So we are currently at noon, which is when we originally anticipated ending. And I think this conversation has been really rich. So I didn't want to squash it at all. That said, before we move, Trudy, Pat, and others, I see some of the questions you guys have offered. If other folks want to make comments or add questions to the chat right now, we'll get to them shortly. But Neil, could you do a little bit, so to use a word, to synthesize a little bit, to use Reggie's term he just used to connect some of the dots that just took place in the conversations across two places. It almost sounded like they could be sitting in the same city, but I think there were some differences. Can you talk a little bit about what we've just heard? Hold on, I gotta unmute you.
Can you hear me?
I wanted to say too, to anybody watching from Milwaukee, I personally went to Newark and I went on a toxic tour, and that's the ports. And I've been rambling about them ports since I left there. I was depressed when I left Newark for about 2 weeks. I was literally depressed when I left there. It's literally worse than Milwaukee. We think it's bad here. It's terrible. It's unheard of. So I just want to say that.
I hear you, Camille. It's an interesting place to teach also, because it is very, very bad, as you say, but there's also a lot of great work going on that makes you really feel really empowered. So I keep that in mind too. When I was asked to sort of synthesize the talk today, I knew it would have to be done on the fly, and I was thinking it would be, extremely difficult to bring these two places together that were half a continent apart. But as I listened to everyone speak, I realized that there are just so many similarities that bring these two places together. So I want to talk right now about shared problems, shared strategies, and shared solutions. But rather than having me sort of give my take on it, I really want to use the words that were spoken today by the activists and the organizers, because they're the ones who are on the front lines, and they're the ones who have expressed what they feel are these commonalities. So I've tried to take notes on some of the quotes, and I just want to read them through and try to let us see these commonalities rather than them coming from me. So regarding the problems, I was just struck when Reggie was talking about the quote breweries and the tanneries in Milwaukee and the disinvestment that went on. It's as if he could have been speaking of Newark. I mean, Newark at one point was the biggest beer manufacturing city in America, and it also has an incredibly long history of leather tanning. So the exact same long history of deindustrialization occurred. And as we know, that accompanies inequality, right? Certain people can move to the suburbs and take their jobs with them, and certain people can't. So the histories are incredibly similar. Christian said, we are surrounded on all sides by polluters. And then Camille mentioned that Milwaukee is really a tale of two cities. And I think those two things also express what we all know, which is that not everyone is affected by this pollution equally, and that often poverty goes hand in hand with being most affected by that pollution. It doesn't matter if you're in Newark or Milwaukee or the South Bronx. If you are poor, you are going to be hit by this pollution much more than people who are wealthy. So again, the Tale of Two Cities analogy really does fit for both locations as well. Along with the problems, there are also these issues of shared strategies. And I was really struck by some of the comments. Camille, you mentioned that local communities have knowledge and that, quote, "we are the experts." And I think that the people of Newark feel very, very similarly. These local communities have the knowledge, they've been adapting, and they've been resilient for hundreds of years. It's not just a new set of inequalities that they've been facing. They've been dealing with this since the days of slavery, through industrialization, through land dispossession, even before that with Native Americans. I mean, these communities have the knowledge and they've been adapting to inequalities for centuries. And we all have to be aware of that and embrace that knowledge and embrace that expertise. Christian, you mentioned that in your work, you, quote, "convince locals that they have a voice." I think this is also a strategy that it's not just trying to convince the local politicians who are in power that things need to change. It's convincing local people, students in local schools, young people, elderly people who feel like they're alone, that they have a voice in their local communities and that voice is what really matters. And that voice is related to that expertise and that knowledge that they have. We have to empower them in that way. And that leads to another quote by Anthony. He said, "we have to empower people to take control for themselves." I mean, that is a strategy, again, getting these people motivated to understand that they have the knowledge within them and from their lived experiences to go out there and direct and control the changes that are happening to their community. Not just let the scientists and the professors come in, as Camille said, get their research done and then leave, right? Demand that those people stay, listen to local community members, accept their knowledge, track the assets that those communities have in this moment of resilience, especially when it comes to COVID and climate change, and then remain and use that local knowledge to empower local people. And then for solutions, I think what's really important here, there are a couple things. Number one, I heard a lot about interconnectivity. Reggie said, it's not just about connecting issues, it's about connecting the dots. Anthony said, all our struggles are interconnected. He mentioned how when other movements come to ask for help, his Newark Water Coalition jumps right in because he knows that later on his group might need help, and then he'll get an alliance with another organization. It's all interconnected. Other solutions were, Adam, you said building power with community members, not for community members. I think that's so right on, right? We have to remember that to build that power, you have to do it with local people, not for local people. And then Camille, you said that that your model is really for collaboration. And I think at that point you were talking about collaboration between the communities and the students. But I think we also might want to think more broadly about collaboration between places like Newark and places like Milwaukee, like we're doing right now. Because although we are so far apart, although we're separated by different time zones, different space, even different cultures, as we've seen, the problems, the solutions, and the strategies all really cohere around a common set of inequalities and a common set of belief in local people, and a common set of taking action for change on a local level. So I just want to reiterate that I think the commonalities came from the people doing the work on the front lines, and I was just recording their quotes and feeding them back. But I think you all see that we have a lot in common, and it should provide us real energy to keep working together, to keep forging and fighting for solutions. So thank you for including me in this conversation.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. Um, there's some great stuff happening in the chat, and there's some great questions happening. I just want to offer really quick. This is a principles of organizing that came to mind multiple times through this conversation that a dear friend of mine in Baltimore, Maryland, named Denise Johnson, who's a cultural organizer connected to the Arch Social Action Network, wrote, which is, Anthony, it kind of just popped into my head as you were talking of like, people show up because they care, they stay because they're engaged. Often that time, though, that's where organizing stops, especially when it's driven by men. A charismatic man who can speak and blah, 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 people come, but they won't give shit to people to do. So people need something to do, but as you were describing, sometimes the energy will wane if you're doing things. And I heard this in what you were describing, Christian, too, and Camille. If shit's not getting done, people stop investing, right? Like they stop showing up if it feels like busy work. So I think this is just a frame for change making that I found to be very powerful, and I just kind of heard emerge out of the conversation. With that, it's 12:09. What we can do now, I mean, we can do Q&As. We can also talk a little. We can wrap up too, right? I think this has been a really rich conversation. I mean, maybe the conversation about collaborations emerging between Milwaukee and Newark can emerge as we move through the month. But I do want to take a shot at that before we end. Do you guys want to just share? Like, I mean, you could even think of it really, really specifically. Anthony, Christian, Reggie, Camille, are there things that we can do to support you? Are there like action steps that we can take? Are there things that we can do for Milwaukee, for Newark, and vice versa? Here's the thing I've always found is that in Milwaukee, a lot of times, like, we don't listen to each other because we're all here. And it's like, you ain't shit unless you got out of Milwaukee. So like, if like Christian and Anthony, if you came to Milwaukee, a ton of people would just listen to you because you're like, oh, they're from Newark. They must know what they're talking about. So is there anything that we can do to mutually support each other's communities, long-term or really specifically short-term? If you guys want to go to a website and click on something so you get money for something, we could do that. What can we do?
Well, I'd like to just make this real quick point, because there's been a lot of controversy about the idea of defunding the police in a lot of communities, right? But this is what people don't understand about the idea of defunding the police. The reason that people want to defund the police isn't just because they have issues with the way policing is done. The main reason people want to defund the police is because back in the 1960s, under the Johnson administration, he started a war on crime. And what he did was he defunded social programs to fund policing, right? So what they're simply trying to do is reverse course from what Lyndon Johnson did, taking money out of the Great Society programs, putting it into policing. For instance, Milwaukee, over the last several years, half of the property taxes collected in the city of Milwaukee have gone to pay for the Milwaukee Police Department. That is absolutely ridiculous. So really the idea of defunding police has nothing to do with the police. It's about putting those funds where they belong, where they should have been, because when you start a war on poverty, but you don't finish it because you're busy now funding police, then guess what? We're stuck where we are right now. So really, I think all of these topics we're talking about are directly connected to putting funds, allocating funds where they would do the most for the most people in those communities, because it doesn't make sense that we keep buying armored vehicles for police departments, but we can't help people get trash collected in their communities. We can't get incinerators removed, which shouldn't have been built there in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Right. I think we can help each other with awareness with these sessions like we have now. I know that when it's a national issue, which a lot of our issues are national issues, I know, like, I had an organizer here who was really focused on lead. I connected him and Anthony. I don't know what happened out of that, if any work, but I think that we need to do more like that and really connect. And like, I wanted to bring the lead exhibit here that they had when we went to Newark, to bring awareness here. I think if we look at what each other is doing, a lot of the things that people are doing in each community, like I think some of the things they're doing in Newark are real dope for the resilience in their neighborhoods. They might think some of the things we're doing are dope and try some of those things. But I think that we really have a big platform with all of the schools and the partners to spread awareness nationally. about some of these issues and to get it out there. And a lot of us have a lot of information that is just not getting out there, even though it's common to us, it's just not common to the world. We see that with the movement now. People like, oh my gosh, I just didn't know it was that way. And we're like, how the hell you didn't know? You know, and so I think we utilize this to do that because there's so many of us and there's so many states.
I mean, the Humanities Action Lab is a really good point here, right? It is a university-run program, but their real core to their mission is letting local people speak for themselves. And I think that that's a great way to connect everyone, right? Through an organization that allows your voices to be heard and really, really promotes local knowledge. So I think that that's one good step, and you're all taking it. So you're already, you're already in, which is amazing.
Anthony and Christian, what can we do to support you guys midterm, short term, long term?
I would say definitely coalition building. We're fortunately enough in a position where we have a lot of resources. So we often share our resources. We have a really great graphics team. So if you folks need graphics, I would say be open-minded into partnership, right? Anything that you need is never off the table, and just always ask us, and we'll always ask the same of you folks. Right now,
can you FedEx me a brick?
I could probably FedEx you a brick. Actually,
that's a misappropriation of resources. I was just okay. Go ahead.
No, I mean, listen. The way I think is that it would be dope. You have the brick. If you send me your brick, I'll send you my brick.
Oh, that's it. You go. That was good organizing. All right, sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
So just sharing just what's going on in Newark through your network helps us provide resources. We're entirely grassroots. We're not, we don't get grants and things like that. So it's just like mom and pops just donating to our GoFundMe. So, spread that link out. I put all the information in the chat. And for us, it's all about best practices. I love hearing what's going on in Milwaukee because, you guys are organizing with different sets of circumstances that I've never realized. And that just helps me grow as an organizer and as an activist on this side. And like I said, I'm always willing to share our resources because I know, what Camille said is definitely true. There are so many people getting paid for the job that I'm doing. And, I'm here struggling, but I do it out of love. At the same time, I understand that I can go a lot farther if I bring more people with me. And so being open to that allows just different opportunities. So if there's anything that you folks need, just please let us know. And so that'll already start the connection that we're building. I would love to come out there, non-COVID time, if COVID ever ends. So
make sure you come in the summer, man. You don't want to come in the winter.
Don't come in the winter, Anthony. Don't come in the fall, like when we be coming there either. Come in the summer.
Well, you don't want to come here in the summertime because this stinks.
Oh man, I could imagine.
It stinks. I would say that for me, I love to hear stories, right? Stories from the people, right? There's nothing that's more motivating than hearing the story of the people who are actually going through the struggle and then hearing the success stories. I don't care how big or small the success is, whether it's like we cleaned up a block and it's clean. Those small stories, they're touching, right? And they become more stories, and at the end of the day, they make changes, whether you know it or not. So, and they motivate people to want to do more and see us, for who we are, through our eyes and not through the eyes of someone else, but through our eyes.
And pay the organizers.
Okay.
You guys have
pay
cash?
The organizers.
You have cash apps you want to put
That's
in the chat?
money. Oh, I got a cash app. Okay, so look, PayPal is Peace Garden Project at
put it in
Gmail.
Camille, put it in the chat.
I'll put it in the comments.
So actually, let's wrap up the public-facing portion here. Trudy made a comment earlier to which Anthony wrote a great response about how, and we'll see this in Milwaukee, people organize around issues, and this will happen with police shootings. And when the settlement happens, the energy dissipates, right? So how do you build around how do you build around an agenda and not just be reactive from issue to issue? And I just want to connect that to the point that Tremarel Robinson's making here. The point she's making, she's listening and agreeing a lot of what's being said. She also agrees it can be exhausting doing the work, and sometimes she just wants to throw in the towel and walk away. But then she thinks of grandchildren in the future. I guess a question I would have is just as it maybe a parting thought before we pull into the private or the non-public conversation is, you know, I think Christian touched on it there a little bit, but how do we keep going and not let, you know, like every day, every week can feel like a gauntlet. What can we do to hold on to make sure that we can keep, so that we can really, in fact, take back our worlds?
So again, I think it goes back to the goal, because, you know, I'm seeing it right now with the Black Lives Matter movement in New Jersey, and where like people are like, we can't talk about abolishing the police. We have to talk about defunding. We can have cops talk at this rally. We could, you know, just all this different noise. And so what I often tell people is, if you don't know where you're going, you're gonna get lost. So if you know that you want to organize around abolishing the police and that's where your heart is, then that's what you do. You don't worry about what other organizations are doing, because they're organizing in a way that you're not doing, or you're not doing. Don't allow your energy to be, you know, don't allow your energy to kind of be sidetracked by, you know, by anyone. And so really having a clear-cut goal in a team allows you to move in that way, and allows you not to be co-opted, and not allows you not to be detracted. One of the things I often talk about, because, you know, and I know I want to say a lot of the organizers on this call can probably speak to, is that like, oh, you're doing this for clout, you're doing this for celebrity, you're doing this because you want your recognition and all of this other stuff. And it's like, no, I'm doing this because I care about my community. And so when people try to, you know, attack me, I always go back to community first. Community first. I'm doing this for my community. You're telling me I'm doing it wrong, then, you know, show up with resources and prove me wrong. And if you're not doing that, then you're just serving it as a distraction. And so it's hard and it's easier said than done, but I think having that goal allows you to have a lot more focus. If you know that you want to do X, Y, and Z, then you don't allow the bullshit to kind of sidetrack you. And I know that's kind of like a intangible thing to say, but like that's really, or an oversimplification, but that's what's really has helped me.
Yep. Anyone else want to?
I hear a bird. It's a wonderful thing to hear.
We need to have a whole discussion about the funding and the abolishing, because Newark there and Camden, they got some things going on there. We should make up a whole nother one at the end of all of them to talk about that. This is such a rich topic.
Well, and any other comments on how to keep forward? Maybe one more, and then we'll cut and Anthony has to go anyways. We'll cut the Facebook Live feed. Anybody else want to offer a concluding thought on how to keep moving forward? All right, well, that's fine. I actually think Anthony's statement was a good one to end on. If you're watching on Facebook Live, thanks for joining us.